Namaste! Welcome to Quick Wisdom with Bliss. My name is Bliss. Meow! And this is my cute little furball friend, Joy. Spirituality is everywhere, in the air we breathe, in nature all around us, and even written into our very DNA. We are energy, and together as energy, we're all connected. We're all one. United as one, we are here on the stage of life to love and help each other live the best we can. Now, I know you've come today to learn about a very special topic, so let's put on our fun caps and get started on this sacred exploration. This is Quick Wisdom with Bliss. The meaning of life. Answering the ultimate question. For as long as mankind has walked the planet, there have been questions. Lots and lots of questions. What is this? Why are we here? What are we headed for? What is our direction? And of course, what is the meaning of life? Is there a way to answer that ultimate question? The meaning of life, or more so the answer to the question, what is the meaning of life, relates to the significance of existence or living in general. Over the years, we've pondered many similar questions, such as, what is life all about? Why are we here? Or even, what is the purpose of existence? Over the years, there have been many proposed answers to these questions, and they come from innumerable different ideological and cultural backgrounds. The quest to find life's meaning has produced much scientific, philosophical, theological, and metaphysical speculation all throughout history. Different cultures and people believe different things for the answers to this question. As we perceive it, the meaning of life is derived from religious contemplation of philosophical and scientific inquiries about social ties, existence, happiness, and consciousness. Several other issues are also involved, like the symbolic meaning, value, purpose, ontology, ethics, free will, good and evil, the existence of one or multiple gods, the soul, the afterlife, and the conceptions of God. Scientific contributions have focused mainly on describing related empirical facts about the universe, exploring the context and parameters concerning the how of life. Science can provide recommendations for a related conception of morality and the pursuit of well-being. A different and more intimate approach asks the question, what is the meaning of my life? Many members of philosophy of science communities and the scientific community believe that science can offer the relevant context and set of parameters which are needed for dealing with topics related to the meaning of life. In a scientist's view, science can offer a broad range of insights on many topics, which range from the parameters of happiness to the finality of death and the anxiety which precedes it. The process of asking scientific questions through nomological investigation into various aspects of life and reality, such as the origin of life, the Big Bang, and evolution, and studying the objective factors which correlate with the subjective experience of meaning and happiness. Researchers in the field of positive psychology study verifiable factors which lead to full engagement in activities, life satisfaction, making a fuller contribution by using one's own personal strengths, and meaning based on investing in something larger than oneself. Large data studies of flow experiences have always suggested that humans experience meaning and fulfillment when they are able to master challenging tasks, and that experience comes from the way that tasks are approached and performed, rather than the particular choice of a task. As an example, let's look at flow experiences. These can be had by prisoners with minimal facilities and can occur only slightly more often in billionaires. Here's a classic example. Take two workers who are working on an apparently boring production line in a factory. One worker treats the job as a tedious chore, and the other turned it into a game to see how fast they can make each unit, thereby achieving flow in the process. Neuroscience details pleasure, motivation, and reward in terms of neurotransmitter activity, mainly in the limbic system and the ventral tegmental area. If someone believes that the meaning of life is to maximize pleasure and to make general life easier, then this will allow normative predictions about how to act to achieve this. Likewise, some ethical naturalists support a science of morality, the verifiable pursuit of successful development for all conscious creatures. Neuroethics and experimental philosophy studies obtain data about human ethical decisions that can be made in controlled scenarios, such as dealing with trolley problems. It has been proven that many types of ethical judgment are universal across cultures, and they suggest that they may be innate, while others are more culture-specific. These findings show actual human ethical reasoning can be at odds with most logical philosophical theories. An example of this is the consistent showing of distinctions between action by cause and action by omission, which would be absent from utility-based theories. Cognitive scientists have theorized about the differences between conservative and liberal ethics, and how they may be based upon different metaphors from family life, such as nurturing mother versus strong father's models. Neurotheology has always been a bit of a controversial field, which tries to find neural correlations and mechanisms of religious experiences. Some scholars suggest that the human brain possesses innate mechanisms to facilitate such experiences, and the living without using them for their evolved purposes may be the cause of an imbalance. Various studies over the years have shown conflicting results on correlating happiness with religious belief, and it's extremely difficult to find unbiased meta-analyses. Wow! Isn't the world magical? It's always telling us something if we take the time to listen. Now, listen to this! Sociology scrutinizes value at a social level by using theoretical constructs like norms, value theory, anomie, etc., and one value system put forth by social psychologists, which is known as terror management theory, illustrates that human meaning is procured from a fundamental fear of dying, and specific values are chosen when they allow us to escape the constant reminder of death. In addition to this, there are many theories about the way in which humans judge the positive and negative characteristics of their existence, and thereby the value and meaning which they place on their lives. Depressive realism submits an exaggerated positivity in all, except those who are experiencing depressive disorders and see life as it truly is. South African philosopher, academic, and author David Benatar has theorized that more weight is usually given to positive experiences, providing a bias of sorts towards an over-optimistic view of life. Emerging studies show that meaning in life can also predict better physical health effects. Greater meaning has been associated with a reduced risk of heart attack among individuals with coronary heart diseases and strokes, reduced rise of Alzheimer's disease, and increased longevity in American and Japanese samples. In 2014, the British National Health Service suggested a 5-step plan for mental well-being based on meaningful lives. These steps are: connect with community and family, physical exercise, lifelong learning, giving to others, mindfulness of the world around you. Scientists have extensively studied life on Earth, and even with all those tireless examinations, defining life in incontrovertible terms remains a challenge. One can state that life feeds on negative entropy, which refers to the procedures by which living entities will decrease their internal entropy at the expense of some kind of energy that is taken in from the environment. Many biologists agree that life forms are self-organizing systems who regulate their internal environments as a means to maintain this organized state. Metabolism will then serve to provide energy, As a result, reproduction will cause life to continue over a span of many generations. Typically, organisms respond to stimuli and genetic information will change from generation to generation. This results in adaptation through evolution, and it optimizes the chances for survival for the individual organism and its descendants respectively. Non-cellular replicating agents like viruses are usually not considered to be organisms because they're not capable of metabolism or independent reproduction. This classification of these agents is problematic because some endosymbionts and parasites can also live independently. Astrobiology examines the possibility of other life forms on other worlds. This includes the replication of structures which are made from materials other than DNA. When it was first introduced, the Big Bang Theory received lots of skepticism, but it has become well supported by many independent observations. But current physics can only describe the early universe from 10 to 43 seconds after the Big Bang, where zero time sinks to infinite temperature. A theory of quantum gravity is required to understand what took place before that point in time. However, many physicists have theorized about what could have become before this limit and how the universe came into being. For example, one analysis is that the Big Bang happened coincidentally, and considering the anthropic principle, it's sometimes seen as implying the existence of a multiverse. The ultimate fate of the universe, and more specifically humanity, is hypothesized as one in which life will sooner or later become unsustainable, such as through a big rip, a big crunch, or a big freeze. Theoretical cosmology takes a look at many alternative speculative models for the origin and eventual fate of the universe beyond the Big Bang Theory. A new way of thinking has seen models of the creation of a baby universe inside black holes, with our own Big Bang being a white hole on the inside of a black hole in another parent universe. Multiverse theories claim that every possibility of quantum mechanics is played out in other parallel universes. What do you think about that, Joy? You're so cute, Joy. I love you. Sorry, lost in cuteness. Let's continue. The origin and nature of the consciousness, along with the mind itself, are also broadly debated in science. The explanatory gap is generally equated with the hard problem of consciousness, and the question of free will is thought to be of rudimentary significance. These subjects are mostly addressed in the fields of neuroscience, the neuroscience of free will, cognitive science, and philosophy of mind, though some evolutionary biologists and theoretical physicists have also made several allusions to the subject. Hieronymus Bosch's Ascent of the Blessed describes a tunnel of light along with spiritual figures, which are often detailed in reports of near-death experiences. Eliminative materialistic and inductionistic approaches, for example the multiple drafts model, contend that consciousness can be thoroughly explained by neuroscience through the workings of the brain and its neurons, thus adhering to biological naturalism. However, various scientists like André Linde, for example, have thought that consciousness, like space-time, might have its own inherent degrees of freedom, and that a person's perceptions can be as real as, or even realer than, material objects. Hypotheses of consciousness in space-time explain consciousness in describing a space of conscious elements, which often encompass a lot of extra dimensions. Electromagnetic theories of consciousness solve the unshakable problem of consciousness by stating that the electromagnetic field emitted by the brain is the actual carrier of the conscious experience. However, there's a lot of disagreement about the implementations of such a theory relating to other workings of the mind. Quantum mind theories use quantum theory to explain various properties of the mind. explaining the operation of free will through quantum phenomena, is a very popular alternative to determinism. Based solely on the premises of the non-materialistic explanations of the mind, some scientists and scholars have suggested the existence of a cosmic consciousness. They assert that consciousness is actually the ground of all being. Advocates of this belief cite accounts of primarily extrasensory perceptions, paranormal phenomena, and psychic powers as possible evidence for incorporeal, higher consciousness. With the intention of proving the existence of these phenomena, parapsychologists have performed various experiments, but the successful results that they have achieved might be because of poor experimental controls and might have alternative explanations. Even though most psychological researchers consider meaning in life as a judgment or a subjective feeling, most philosophers like Thaddeus Metz and Daniel Hebron believe that there is also an objective, concrete criteria for what constitutes meaning in life. Wong has suggested that whether or not life is meaningful depends not only on subjective feelings, but also whether a person's goal-striving and a life as a whole is meaningful according to their objective normative stand. Plato, a pupil of Socrates, was one of the first and most influential philosophers. Plato's reputation stems from his idealism of believing in the existence of universals. His theory of forms suggests that universals don't physically exist, like objects, but instead they are heavenly forms. In the Dialogue of the Republic, Socrates describes the form of the good. His theory on justice in the soul comes in relation to the idea that happiness is relevant to the question of the meaning of life. According to Platonism, the meaning of life is in attaining the highest form of knowledge, which is the idea, or more specifically, the form of the good, from which all good and just things derive utility and value. Plato's apprentice, Aristotle, was another early and hugely influential philosopher who contended that ethical knowledge, by and large, is not certain knowledge, like epistemology or metaphysics. Aristotle maintained that because it is not a theoretical discipline, an individual must study and practice as a means to become good. If the person were to become virtuous, they could not simply study what virtue is. They had to be virtuous via virtuous activities. As a means to do this, Aristotle established what is virtuous. Every skill and every inquiry, and similarly, every action and choice of action, is thought to have some good as its object. This is why the good has rightly been defined as the object of all endeavor. Everything is done with a goal, and that goal is good. Yet, if action A is done towards achieving goal B, then goal B would also have a goal, goal C, and goal C will also have a goal, and so would continue this pattern until something stopped in its infinite regression. Aristotle's answer to this problem is what he referred to as the highest good, a good that is desirable for its own sake. The highest good is its own goal. It's not desirable for the sake of achieving some other good, and all other goods desirable for its sake. This involves achieving eudaimonia, which is usually translated as happiness, well-being, flourishing, and excellence. So the question beckons, what is the highest good in all matters of action? The educated and uneducated alike refer to it as happiness, and they make happiness identical to the good life and successful living. In and of itself, that poses yet another question. What is happiness? A pupil of Socrates known as Antisthenes outlined the themes of Cynicism. He stated that the purpose of life is to live a life of virtue that agrees with nature. Happiness is dependent on being self-sufficient and the master of one's mental attitude. On the flip side, suffering is the consequence of false judgments of value that can cause negative emotions and create an associated vicious character. The cynical life disregards the usual desires for power, health, wealth, and fame by being free of any possessions that were acquired in pursuit the conventional. As thinking creatures, individuals can achieve happiness by employing rigorous training and by living in a way that is natural to human beings. The world belongs to everyone equally, so suffering originates from false judgments of what is valuable and what is worthless as per the conventions and customs of society. Another pupil of Socrates, known as Aristippus of Cyrene, started an early Socratic school which emphasized only one side of his mentor's teachings, the belief that happiness is actually one of the ends of moral action because pleasure is the supreme good. Some would say that this is a hedonistic view of the world, where bodily gratifications are far more sought after than mental pleasures. A pupil of the Platonist Pamphilus of Samos Epicurus taught that the greatest good is in seeking modest pleasures as a means to attain tranquility and freedom from fear, known as ataraxia, via friendship, knowledge, and virtuous temperate living. Bodily pain, known as aponia, is missing through one's knowledge of the workings of the world and, of course, the limits of an individual's desires. Combined, freedom from pain and freedom from fear are happiness in its highest form. Epicurus's extolled enjoyment of what is known as simple pleasures is quasi-ascetic, abstention from sex and the appetites. When we say that pleasure is the end and aim, we do not mean the pleasures of the prodigal or the pleasures of sensuality, as we are understood to do by some through ignorance, prejudice, or willful misrepresentation. By pleasure, we mean the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul. It's not by an unbroken succession of drinking bouts and revelry, not by sexual lust, nor the enjoyment of fish and other delicacies of a luxurious table, which produce a pleasant life. It is sober reasoning, searching out the grounds of every choice and avoidance, and banishing those beliefs through which the greatest tumults take possession of the soul. The Epicurean meaning of life denounces mysticism and immortality. A soul is present, but it's as mortal as the body itself. There's no afterlife, yet death is something that we should not fear because death is nothing to us, for that which is dissolved is without sensation, and that which lacks sensation is nothing to us. A pupil of Crates of Thebes, known as Zeno of Citium, created the school that teaches that living in accordance to reason and virtue is to be in harmony with the universe's divine order, entailed by one's recognition of the universal logos, or reason, an essential value of all people. Therefore, meaning of life is freedom from suffering through apatheia. That is, being objective and having clear judgment and not indifference. Joy, are you ready to learn more? That's what I thought. Here we go. Blessings of knowledge. Let these facts heal us with understanding. Stoicism's prime directives are reason, virtue, and natural law, which is upheld as a means to develop personal self-control and mental fortitude to overcome destructive emotions. The Stoic doesn't seek to terminate emotions. Instead, it looks to avoid emotional troubles by developing clear judgment and inner calm through reflection, concentration, and diligently practiced logic. The Stoic ethical foundation is that good lies in the state of the soul, itself exemplified in wisdom and self-control, thus improving one's spiritual well-being. Virtue consists in a will which is in agreement with nature. The principle applies to one's personal relations. Thus, to be free from anger, envy, and jealousy. The colonial era and the Enlightenment both changed the nature of European philosophy and then exported it worldwide. Subservience and devotion to God were greatly replaced by the potentialities of reason, notions of inalienable natural rights, and universal ideals of love and compassion gave way to civic notions of equality, freedom, and citizenship. As a result, the meaning of life changed too, as it now focused far less on humankind's relationship with God and more on the relationship between society and its individuals. This era is filled with theories that equate meaningful existence with the social order. Classic liberalism is a set of ideas which arose during the 17th and 18th centuries, out of conflicts between a wealthy, growing propertied class and the already established aristocratic and religious orders which engulfed Europe. Liberalism cast humans as beings with inalienable natural rights, including the right to retain the wealth generated by one's own work, and sought out means to balance rights throughout society. Generally speaking, it considers the individual's liberty to be the most important goal, because only through liberty are the other inherent rights protected. There are many kinds and versions of liberalism. However, their central conceptions of the meaning of life can be tracked back to three main ideas. Early thinkers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Locke, and Adam Smith saw humankind beginning in the state of nature. From there, it began finding meaning for existence through property and labor, and using social contracts to build an environment which supports those efforts. That is quick wisdom if you ask me. What do you think, Joy? Well said, Joy. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, are you ready to get deeper into this? Okay then. Kantianism is a philosophy that is based on the epistemological, ethical, and metaphysical works of Immanuel Kant. He is known for his deontological theory in which there is only a single moral obligation, the categorical imperative, and it is derived from the concept of duty. Kantians are of the mindset that every action is performed in accordance with some underlying principle or maxim, and for actions to be considered ethical, they must stick to the categorical imperative. To put it simply, the test is that an individual must universalize the maxim. Imagine that all people acted in this way, and then test if it's still possible to perform the maxim in the world without being met by contradiction. In Groundwork, Kant cites an example of a person who is looking to borrow money without any intention of paying it back. This in and of itself is a contradiction, because if this was a universal action, no one would lend money anymore as they would know that they will never be paid back. Kant says that the maxim of this action results in a contradiction in conceivability, and that itself contradicts any perfect duty. Kant also denies that the consequences brought about by an act in any way contributes to the moral worth of said act. Kant's reasoning behind this is because the physical world is outside of anyone's full control. One cannot be held responsible for the events that happen in it. The origins of utilitarianism can be traced back as far as Epicurus, but as a school of thought, it's attributed to English philosopher, economist, and theoretical jurist Jeremy Bentham. Bentham contended that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. Then, from that moral insight, he procured what's best become known as the rule of utility, that the good is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. Bentham defined the meaning of life as the greatest happiness principle. Bentham's stanchest support was James Mill, who was a significant philosopher in his day and the father of John Stuart Mill. The younger Mill was taught Bentham's principles, including summarizing and the transcription of most of his father's work. Philosopher, German classical scholar, and critic of culture, Friedrich Nietzsche, characterized nihilism as the act of emptying the world, and human existence in particular, of purpose, meaning, essential value, and comprehensible truth. Succinctly, this means that nihilism is the process of the devaluing of the highest values. Nietzsche saw the nihilist as a natural result of the idea that God is dead, and insisting that this was something to be overcome. His questioning of the nihilist's life-negating values gave meaning back to the earth. Seminal thinker and German philosopher and Martin Heidegger believed that nihilism is the movement whereby being is forgotten and is then transformed into value. In other words, the reduction of a being as a means to exchange value. Heidegger, in line with Nietzsche, saw in the so-called death of God a prospective starting point for nihilism. If God, as the suprasensory ground and goal of all reality, is dead, if the suprasensory world of the ideas has suffered the loss of its obligatory and, above it, its vitalizing and upbuilding power, then nothing more remains to which man can cling and by which he can orient himself. The modern era has been through radical changes, both formally and in the popular conceptions of human nature. The knowledge proven by modern science has rewritten the relationship between the natural world and humankind. Advances made in the fields of technology and medicine have unshackled humans from the once significant limitations and ailments of previous eras. Even philosophy itself, particularly following the linguistic turn, has altered how the relationships that individuals have with themselves and each other are developed. As a result, questions regarding the meaning of life have also seen their fair share of radical changes, from attempts to reevaluate human existence in biological and scientific terms, as in pragmatism and logical positivism, to efforts to meta-theorize about meaning, making as a personal, individual-driven activity, existentialism, secular humanism. Pragmatism began during the late 19th century US, and it concerned itself mostly with truth, positing that only in struggling with the environment do data and derived theories have meaning, and that consequences, like utility and practicality, are also parts of truth. Therefore, pragmatism assumes that anything practical and useful is not always true, contending that what most contributes to the most human good in the long course is indeed factual. Practicing theoretical claims have to be practically verifiable, meaning an individual should be able to both predict and test claims, and that ultimately the needs of humankind should therefore guide human intellectual inquiry. Pragmatic philosophers propose that the useful and practical understanding of life is far more important than searching for an impractical and thoroughly abstract truth about life. American psychologist and philosopher William James maintained that truth could be made but not sought. To a pragmatist, the meaning of life can only be attained via experience. These fun facts fill my heart with happiness. I love learning, don't you? I hope these spiritual concepts are becoming clear. Let's keep learning. Theists are of the belief that God created the universe and had great purpose in doing so. Theists are also of the mindset, the view that humans find their meaning and purpose for life in God's purpose in creating. Theists further believe that if there were no God to give life ultimate meaning, purpose, and value, then life would be, in a word, absurd. Existentialists believe that each man and each woman creates the essence or meanings of their own life, and that life is not determined by a supernatural God or some other earthly authority. Individuals are free. Because of this, one's ethical prime directives are freedom, action, and decision. Thus, existentialism opposes rationalism and positivism. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard talked about a leap, contended that life is brimming with absurdity, and because of this, an individual must make his and her own values in an indifferent world. Kierkegaard believes that an individual can live meaningfully while being free of despair and anxiety by intentionally committing to something finite and by devoting that meaningful life to the commitment in spite of the vulnerability that comes along with doing so. German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer gave his answer to what is the meaning of life by saying that an individual's life reflects their will, and that the will is an irrational, aimless, and painful drive. Deliverance, salvation, and escape from suffering are an aesthetic contemplation, sympathy for others, and asceticism. In the absurdist philosophy, absurdity rises out of the fundamental disharmony between one's search to find a meaning and the apparent meaninglessness of the universe. As individuals looking for meaning in a meaningless world, humankind has 3 ways of resolving the dilemma. Kierkegaard and Camus describe the solutions in their works, 1849's The Sickness Unto Death and 1942's The Myth of Sisyphus. Suicide, or escaping existence, a solution in which a person simply ends one's own life. Both Kierkegaard and Camus dismiss the viability of this option. Religious belief in a transcendent realm of being, a solution in which one believes in the existence of a reality that is beyond the absurd, and, as such, has meaning. Kierkegaard stated that a belief in anything beyond the absurd requires a non-rational but perhaps necessary religious acceptance in such an intangible and empirically unprovable thing, now commonly referred to as a leap of faith. However, Camus regarded this solution as philosophical suicide. Acceptance of the absurd, a solution in which one accepts and even embraces the absurd and continues to live in spite of it. Camus endorsed this solution, most notably in his 1947 allegorical novel The Plague, or La Peste, while Kierkegaard regarded the solution as demonic madness. He rages most of all at the thought that eternity might get it into its head to take his misery from him. As per secular humanism, the human species came to be by reproducing successive generations in a progression of unguided evolution as an important expression of nature, which is self-existing. Human knowledge comes from experimentation, human observation, and rational analysis, the scientific method, and not from supernatural sources. The nature of the universe is what people discern it to be. Likewise, values and realities are determined by means of intelligent inquiry and are derived from human needs and interest as tested by experience, that is, by critical intelligence. As far as we know, the total personality is a function of the biological organism transacting in a social and cultural context. Individuals determine human purpose without supernatural influence. It is the human personality that is the purpose of a human being's life. Humanism seeks to develop and fulfill. Humanism affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. Humanism aims to promote enlightened self-interest and the common good for all people. It is based on the premises that the happiness of the individual person is inextricably linked to the well-being of all humanity, in part because humans are social animals who find meaning in personal relations, and because cultural progress helps everybody living in the culture. The philosophical subgenres, posthumanism and transhumanism, are extensions of humanistic values. One should seek the advancement of humanity and of all life to the highest degree feasible, and seek to reconcile Renaissance humanism with the 21st century's techno-scientific culture. In this light, every living creature has the right to determine its personal and social meaning of life. From a humanism psychotherapeutic point of view, the question of the meaning of life could be reinterpreted as, what is the meaning of my life? This approach emphasizes that the question is personal and avoids focusing on cosmic or religious questions about overarching purpose. There are many therapeutic responses to this question. For example, Austrian psychologist Viktor Frankl argues for de-reflection, which translates largely as cease endlessly reflecting on the self, instead engage in life. On the whole, the therapeutic response is that the question itself, what is the meaning of life, evaporates when one is fully engaged in life. Logical positivists ask, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning in asking? And if there are no objective values, then is life meaningless? Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein and the logical positivists said, expressed in language, the question is meaningless, because in life the statement, the meaning of X, usually denotes the consequences of X, or the significance of X, or what is notable about X, etc. Thus, when the meaning of life concept equals X, and the statement, the meaning of X, the statement becomes recursive, and therefore nonsensical, or it might refer to the fact that biological life is essential to having a meaning in life. The things or people and events in the life of a person can have meaning and importance as parts of a whole, but a discrete meaning of life itself, aside from those things, cannot be discerned. A person's life has meaning for themselves and others, as the life events resulting from their achievements, legacy, family, and more. But to say that life itself has a meaning is a misuse of language, since any note of significance or of consequence is irrelevant only in life to the living, so rendering the statement erroneous. Bertrand Russell wrote that although he found his distaste for torture was not like his distaste for broccoli, he found no satisfactory empirical method of proving this. When we try to be definite as to what we mean when we say this or that is the good, we find ourselves involved in very great difficulties. Bentham's creed, that pleasure is the good, roused furious opposition and was said to be a pig's philosophy. Neither he nor his opponents could advance any argument. In a scientific question, evidence can be adduced on both sides, and in the end, one side is seen to have the better case. Or if this does not happen, the question is left undecided. But in a question as to whether this or that is the ultimate good, there is no evidence either way. Each disputant can only appeal to his own emotions and employ such rhetorical devices as shall rouse similar emotions in others. Questions as to values, that is to say, as to what is good or bad on its own account, independently of its effects, lies outside the domain of science, as the defenders of religion emphatically assert. I think that, in this way, they are right, but I draw the further conclusion, which they do not draw, that question as to values lie wholly outside the domain of knowledge. That is to say, when we assert that this or that has value, we are giving expression to our own emotions, not to a fact, which would still be true if our personal feelings were different. Wow! Isn't the world magical? It's always telling us something if we take the time to listen. Now, listen to this! Postmodernist thought, broadly speaking, sees human nature as constructed by language, or by structures and institutions of human society. Unlike other forms of philosophy, postmodernism rarely seeks out a priori or innate meanings in human existence, but instead focuses on analyzing or critiquing given meanings in order to rationalize or reconstruct them. Anything resembling a meaning of life in postmodernist terms can only be understood within a social and linguistic framework, and must be pursued as an escape from the power structures that are already embedded in all forms of speech and interaction. As a rule, postmodernists see awareness of the constraints of language as necessary to escaping those constraints, but different theorists take different views on the nature of this process. From radical reconstruction of meaning by individuals, as in deconstructionism, to theories in which individuals are primarily extensions of language in society, without real autonomy, as in post-structuralism. The Mohist philosophers believed that the purpose of life was universal, impartial love. Mohism promoted a philosophy of impartial caring. A person should care equally for all other individuals, regardless of their actual relationship to him or her. The expression of this indiscriminate caring is what makes man a righteous being in Mohist thought. This advocacy of impartiality was a target of attack by other Chinese philosophical schools, most notably the Confucians, who believed that while love should be unconditional, it should not be indiscriminate. For example, children should hold a greater love for their parents than for random strangers. Confucianisms recognize human nature in accordance with the need for discipline and education. Because humankind is driven by both positive and negative influences, Confucianists see a goal in achieving virtue through strong relationships and reasoning, as well as minimizing the negative. This emphasis on normal living is seen in the Confucianist scholar Tu Weiming's quote, "We can realize the ultimate meaning of life in ordinary human existence." The religious perspectives on the meaning of life are those ideologies which explain life in terms of implicit purpose, not defined by humans. According to the Charter for Compassion, signed by many of the world's leading religious and secular organizations, the core of religion is the golden rule of treat others as you would have them treat you. The Charter's founder, Karen Armstrong, quotes the ancient Rabbi Hillel, who suggested that the rest is commentary. This is not to reduce the commentary's importance, and Armstrong considers that its study, interpretation, and ritual are the means by which religious people internalize and live the golden rule. In the Judaic worldview, the meaning of life is to elevate the physical world and prepare it for the world to come, the Messianic era. This is called Tikkun Olam. Olam Haba can also mean the spiritual afterlife, and there is debate concerning the eschatological order. However, Judaism is not focused on personal salvation, but on communal between man and individual between man and God, spiritualized actions in this world. Judaism's most important feature is the worship of a single, incomprehensible, transcendent, one indivisible absolute being, who created and governs the universe. Closeness with God of Israel is through study of his Torah and adherence to its mitzvot. In traditional Judaism, God established a special covenant with the people of Israel, at Mount Sinai, giving the Jewish commandments. Torah comprises the written Pentateuch and the transcribed oral tradition, further developed through the generations. The Jewish people are intended as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and a light to the nations, influencing the other peoples to keep their own religio-ethical 7 laws of Noah. The Messianic era is seen as the perfection of this dual path to God. Jewish observances involve ethical and ritual, affirmative and prohibitive injunctions. Modern Jewish denominations differ over the nature, relevance, and emphasis of mitzvot. Jewish philosophy emphasizes that God is not affected nor benefited, but the individual and society benefit by drawing close to God. The rationalist Maimonides sees the ethical and ritual divine commandments as a necessary but insufficient preparation for philosophical understanding of God, with its love and awe. Among fundamental values in the Torah are pursuit of justice, compassion, peace, kindness, hard work, prosperity, humility, and education. The world to come, prepared in the present, elevates man to an everlasting connection with God. Simeon the Righteous says, "The world stands on 3 things: on Torah, on worship, and on acts of loving kindness." The prayer book relates, "Blessed is our God who created us for his honor and planted within us everlasting life." Of this context, the Talmud states, "Everything that God does is for the good." including suffering. The Jewish mystical Kabbalah gives a complementary esoteric meaning of life, as well as Judaism providing an immanent relationship with God. In Kabbalah, the spiritual and physical creation is a paradoxical manifestation of the immanent aspects of God's being, related to the Shekhinah. Jewish observance unites the Sephirot on high, restoring harmony to creation. In Lurianic Kabbalah, the meaning of life is the messianic rectification of the shattered sparks of God's persona, exiled in physical existence through the actions of Jewish observance. Through this, in Hasidic Judaism, the ultimate essential desire of God is the revelation of the omnipresent divine essence through materiality, achieved by man from within his limited physical realm, when the body will give life to the soul. Christianity has its roots in Judaism and shares much of the latter's faith's ontology. Its central beliefs derive from the teachings of Jesus Christ, as presented in the New Testament. Life's purpose in Christianity is to seek divine salvation through the grace of God and intercession of Christ. The New Testament speaks of God wanting to have a relationship with humans, both in this life and the life to come, which can happen only if one's sins are forgiven. In the Christian view, humankind was made in the image of God and perfect, but the fall of man caused the progeny of the first parents to inherit original sin and its consequences. Christ's passion, death, and resurrection provide the means for transcending that impure state. The good news that this restoration from sin is now possible is called the gospel. The specific process of appropriating salvation through Christ and maintaining a relationship with God varies between different denominations of Christians, but all rely on faith in Christ and the gospel as the fundamental starting point. Catholicism's way of thinking is better expressed through the principle and foundation of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. The human person is created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by doing so, to save his or her soul. All other things on the face of the earth are created for human beings in order to help them pursue the end for which they are created. It follows from this that one must use other created things insofar as they help towards one's end, and free oneself from them insofar as they are obstacles to one's end. To do this, we need to make ourselves indifferent to all created things, provided the matter is subject to our free choice and there is no other prohibition. Thus, as far as we're concerned, we should not want health more than illness, wealth more than poverty, fame more than disgrace, a long life more than a short one, and similarly for all the rest. But we should desire and choose only what helps us more towards the end for which we are created. Mormonism teaches that the purpose of life on earth is to gain knowledge and experience and to have joy. Mormons believe that humans are literally the spirit children of God, the Father, and thus have the potential to progress to become like Him. Mormons teach that God provided His children the choice to come to earth, which is considered a crucial stage in their development, wherein a mortal body, coupled with the freedom to choose, makes for an environment to learn and grow. The fall of Adam is not viewed as an unfortunate or unplanned cancellation of God's original plan for a paradise. Rather, the opposition found in morality is an essential element of God's plan, because the process of enduring and overcoming challenges, difficulties, and temptations provides opportunities to gain wisdom and strength, thereby learning to appreciate and choose good and reject evil. Because God is just, He allows those who are not taught the gospel during morality to receive it after death in the spirit world, so that all of His children have the opportunity to return to live with God and to reach their full potential. A recent alternative Christian theological discourse interprets Jesus as revealing that the purpose of life is to elevate our compassionate response to human suffering. Nonetheless, the conventional Christian position is that people are justified by belief in the proprietary sacrifice of Jesus' death on the cross. In Islam, humanity's ultimate purpose is to discover their creator, Allah, through his signs and to be grateful to him through sincere love and devotion. This is practically shown by following the divine guidelines revealed in the Quran and the tradition of the Prophet. Earthly life is a test determining one's position of closeness to Allah in the hereafter. A person will either be close to him and his love in paradise or far away in hell. For Allah's satisfaction via the Quran, all Muslims must believe in God, his revelations, his angels, his messengers, and in the Day of Judgment. The 5 pillars of Islam are duties incumbent to every Muslim. They are Shahada, the profession of faith, Salat, the ritual of prayer, Zakah, the importance of charity, Psalm, the fasting during Ramadan, and Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. They derive from the hadith works, notably of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The 5 pillars are not mentioned directly in the Quran. Wow, I can feel my spirit evolving as we learn all this new and important information. And there's more! Hinduism is a religious category including many beliefs and traditions. Since Hinduism was the way of expressing meaningful living for a long time, before there was a need for naming it as a separate religion, Hinduism doctrines are supplementary and complementary in nature, generally non-exclusive, suggestive, and tolerant in content. Most believe that the person's true self is eternal. In part, this stems from Hindu beliefs that spiritual development occurs across many lifetimes, and goals should match the state of development of the individual. There are 4 possible aims to human life, known as the Purusharthas. From least to greatest, they are 1. Kama, wish, desire, love, and sensual pleasure. 2. Artha, wealth, prosperity, glory. 3. Dharma, righteousness, duty, morality, virtue ethics, encompassing notions such as ahimsa, nonviolence, and satya, truth. 4. Moksha, liberation, an example, the liberation from samsara, the cycle of reincarnation. In all schools of Hinduism, the meaning of life is tied up in the concepts of casual action known as karma, samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth and liberation. Existence is conceived as the progression of the Atman, which is similar to the Western concept of a soul, across numerous lifetimes, and its ultimate progression towards liberation from karma. Particular goals for life are generally subsumed under broader yogas or practices, or dharma, which is the act of correct living, which are intended to create more favorable reincarnations, though they are generally positive acts in this life as well. Traditional schools of Hinduism often worship devas, which are manifestations of Ishvara, which is a personal or chosen god. These devas are taken as ideal forms to be identified with, as a form of spiritual improvement. That is quick wisdom if you ask me. What do you think, Joy? Well said, Joy. I couldn't agree with you more. Now, are you ready to get deeper into this? Okay then. Buddhists practice to embrace with mindfulness sufferings and ill-beings and well-beings that is present in life. Buddhists practice to see the causes of ill-being and well-being in life. For example, one of the causes of suffering is unhealthy attachment to objects, material or non-material. The Buddhist sutras and tantras do not speak about the meaning of life or the purpose of life, but about the potential of human life to end suffering, for example through embracing, not suppressing or denying cravings and conceptual attachments. Attaining and perfecting dispassion is a process of many levels that ultimately results in the state of nirvana. The meaning of life has also been showcased in many different mediums, such as Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. In that film, there are several allusions to the meaning of life. At the end of the film, a character played by Michael Pollan is handed an envelope containing the meaning of life, which he opens and reads out to the audience. Well, it's nothing very special. Try to be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, and try to live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations. Many other Monty Python sketches and songs are also existential in nature, questioning the importance we place on life. Always look on the bright side of life, and other meaning of life-related questioning. John Cleese also had his sitcom character Basil Fawlty contemplating the futility of his own existence in Fawlty Towers. In Douglas Adams' popular comedy book, movie, television, and radio series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is given the numeric solution 42, after 7.5 million years of calculation by a giant supercomputer called Deep Thought. When this answer is met with confusion and anger from its constructors, Deep Thought explains that, "I think the problem such as it was too broadly based. You never actually stated what the question was." Deep Thought then constructs another computer, the Earth, to calculate what the ultimate question actually is. Later, Ford and Arthur managed to extract the question as the Earth computer would have rendered it. That question turns out to be, what do you get if you multiply 6 by 9? And it is realized that the program was ruined by the unexpected arrival of the Golga Frinchans on Earth, and so the actual ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything remains unknown. While 6 times 9 would be written as 42 in the tridecimal numeral system, author Douglas Adams claimed that this was mere coincidence and completely serendipitous. We may never get the exact answers that we're seeking when it comes to life's truest meanings. But, as you know now, there's a wealth of ideas and theories out there to help us along our paths. Maybe finding the right one, the one you relate to the most, maybe that's where you'll find your own true meaning. That's the kind of beauty and knowledge that can never be taken away. Now that's quick wisdom with bliss, and that wraps up our learning for today's fascinating subject. I hope your spirit has grown as much as mine has. Please come see me anytime to discuss more spiritual ideas and heart-fulfilling concepts. What was that, Joy? You don't want them to leave? Aw, neither do I. Well, they can stay if they want to. Now, let's meditate on our next adventure.